Thank you. Good evening once again. Good to see you again. So we have somebody here from the SEBI. That itself shows how important this panel discussion is. Can we have a special clap for the SEBI?
Thank you.
Okay, great. So great to be back here. And as you know, the topic of this particular discussion is technological evolution in financial crime and analytics. Unfortunately, Mr. Mahesh Rajaram from Yes Bank supposed to be here, but unfortunately can't come because of bad health. But nonetheless, we'll go ahead, and again, I have very specific questions for all of you. You heard the first panel where we discussed and deliberated in terms of how the financial frauds are happening and what could be the solutions. Here we'll try to take a view in terms of how to control the absolute financial crimes with the technology. I think one interesting thing that the regulators are also looking at is, in fact, they are trying to onboard ethical hackers, right? A lot of BFSI companies also did that to counter or encounter the hackers specifically. So Sunilkumar ji, let me come to you directly and learn from you in terms of how are organizations setting up their line of defense? How are they integrating the different control groups, partnerships in a meaningful and operationalized manner specifically to deal with the financial crime?
Yeah, good evening all, and thank you very much. In the financial crime world, when we look at it, starts from the traditional money laundering and fraud, corruption, bribery, weapons of mass destruction. It's a wide variety of area. Traditionally, yes, of course, the lines of defense when we talk about is basically the first line, second line, third line. First line brings the customers, analyzes the customers, and then undertakes the transaction. Second line sets the risk parameters or compliance parameters to that extent and monitor. And the third line comes to do the subsequent checking whether first line controls are working, second line principles or the risk or compliance ownership is working well or not. So that is the way traditionally it is going on. When specifically looking into the financial crime compliance world, a lot of transformation has been taken place. That is where you may feel that there is an integration or a merging of these responsibilities coming up. I would rather say that rather than this merging, what might have happened is basically the control function, the AML monitoring team to that extent, or the compliance team to a wider perspective, is stepping into more shoes, that is even the frontline shoes to a certain extent, or even to an auditor's role to that extent. So that expansion is what we feel that the merging of these three lines are happening in the context of the money laundering and the or financial crime context. To set the context to that extent, the traditional way of actually client onboarding the process of one of the questions in the previous panel, one of the question asked, what are you doing to client analysis, profiling, and all those things. Yes, theoretically, all these things are very good. But the client profiling, when we look at the stage and some 10 years back, yes, client is coming to the branch, you are sitting, you can wait for opening an account or a relationship beginning 2 days, 3 days, client will come next day also. That era has gone. Now, we are behind the clients, and what the client is demanding is that within fraction of seconds can I have the accounts. And the mechanisms are there. How you identified the clients 5 years or 10 years back, you have the different sets of documents. Now, particularly in India, and resonates in many other countries also, there is identification document is very simple to that extent, and Aadhaar card is what it has been used for majority of the cases. And even the regulatory mechanism to that extent, that this OTP-based eKYC account opening, the customers are not ready to wait, and we can't keep them waiting, and that is not the model. So naturally, the customers are onboarded very fast to that extent. The profiling, definitely for a larger accounts you would do, but majority of the accounts, this Jan Dhan account, what we are talking, OTP-based eKYC accounts, and all the digital account opening, what is happening. So in our space, what I have seen is that the digital account opening, the moment it is unleashed, whether it is through the various these modes has been set, whether it RE to RE to the setup or the eKYC mode or even to the VKYC mode, the number of account opening is happening all to 3 to 5 times than the traditional mode. So this is the number what we are grappling with. And when we look at in that context, and particularly in the digital context, what is there? We have not seen the customer, we can't feel the customer, we can't smell the customer. What we have is some virtual image has been given and certain data. And of course, all this data validation, you have a process. Anything Aadhaar is given, UDAI site it is you are getting. PAN is given, again it can be checked. Everything is checked. So almost all the cases, the KYC, when you look at the document, is perfect. Of course, again, we can say that KYC is knowing your customer, not knowing or taking the documents. But in this digital transformation world, what is happening is that yes, the documents or the data has been captured. Yes, of course, you can run the machines and the artificial intelligence to that extent. You can validate your ID card, your photo, what is coming, your retina can be scanned to that extent, and whether it is matching with the face match, liveliness check, all these things can be done. But we are getting the documents, we are having the data, and this is where we are actually looking into when we see in a money laundering context what needs to be done or a financial crime perspective. So the client onboarding, client profiling and all, for the large number of almost 80% of the accounts, technically it won't apply. We can talk about theoretically, yes, that needs to be done, but that is not the reality. Then the next thing what we have is really the data, transactional pattern and the behavior. That is what we are actually analyzing, and that analysis for the purpose is what the control function team or the second line team is actually expanding. So the onboarding process, automatically it happens, then the transaction starts, and that is what the data is monitoring. And another challenge is what? Now the customers are also aware, everywhere saying that in this meeting also itself, when the customers are getting a phone call, don't attend it. So the problem is that this centralized team, when tries to contact the customer, he is not going to respond. He will only respond to the branch manager he knows. He is not going to respond to anybody else. So that option is also not available. The only thing is to look at the transactional data. We have various sets of data points coming up. One is within the organization itself, whether it is UPI, net banking, whatever it is happening, or RTGS, IMPS, all those related data is there. If there is a credit, but these are all earlier in the silos, but everything now can be combined in the data lake and analytics is being done. And we spoke about real time. Real time is a very relevant thing, but the problem is the volume of the transaction. When we look at the speed is the expected. Yes. Can we do in real time? It may not be. And I am not saying that if everything is not happening real time also, if we can do as early as possible, because big number of a big amount, a high value fraud is happening. There are lots of preparations and it will take its own time. And what the other frauds are happening is small value transactions, number of transactions. So absolutely, don't be bothered about too much on the time. But it is not, when I say it is not the three months time or something like that, within 24 hours, 48 hours, now this artificial intelligence, the data analytics is there. We can get it within 24 hours, what is the pattern happening and how the behavior is happening, everything on a same screen. Right. That is where we can actually analyze and do this thing. Sure. So integration is happening, the control functions playing a wider role to that extent and integrating everything. And the same way it was earlier discussed, the fraud team, compliance team, monitoring team, and the risk team, audit team, all are actually coordinating and working towards to get this. Thank you.
Sure. I think, so Maheshji, let me come to you. So Sunilji made a point also that, sometimes they don't know who the customer is. But when I speak specifically about the digital lending, you come to my office specifically in the Lower Parel area of Kamla Mill and I can show you the customers, specifically the BNPL customers. Most of them are parting, by, digital lending apps which they have borrowed on. So Manish, my question to you on the similar lines, when the digital lending is happening aggressively with the help of the fintechs and, most of the products like BNPL, microfinance, are coming into the views. How do you actually maintain the frauds happens on that particular thing and the defaults also? Because the defaults on that side, the ticket size is small, but the numbers are also large.
So thank you, Amol. Thank you, ETBFSI team, for having me here. There are 2-3 things I would like to touch upon here is, I think what we are talking, even the previous session and this session, is only 2 things. And conceptually, if you see, there are a lot of noise. When I see, there are a lot of noise in terms of a data, in terms of a jargon, in terms of a word, in terms of a journeys. Okay. For doing a transaction, you need only 2 things. This is A and A, an authentication and an authorization, right, from the lender's perspective or from the customer's perspective. So, for an authentication, you look at the identification verification. We are living in a country like India. We are fortunate to live in a country like India where 140 crore Aadhars are there. Okay. The problem is that, and you just do this study, you need to just go onto the net and see that the number of applications or the number of platforms you go for availing any services or availing any loan or availing any other thing, okay, or doing any sort of a transaction, at the end of the day, he will require what is an authentication method. And all of these journeys will have a different authentication methodology, while the pool of an information which will be coming in will be the same. Okay? Yeah. That's where the real risk exists. And you're not talking only about the enterprise. If you look within the company or within the institution itself, if there are 10 channels, and the previous channels talked a lot about the channels. Right. If there are 10 channels and the source system is only the CBS, okay, the authentication method to reach out to that source system or a core system are different. And that is where we are confusing the customer, and that is where we are creating the risk. So like an India stack, you need to have a predefined APIs for an authentication which should be spread across the board. Right. That's the point number 1 from that. And your second question, sorry, I missed the second question. You had 2 questions.
So how do you actually manage those frauds then?
Okay. So the question is authorization. So so I only missed my previous one. So once you have the real authentication mitigated, your 80-90% frauds will get mitigated if we have the right authentication design. Okay. And I'm not talking only for account opening, loan opening, doing a financial transaction, financial event, anything and everything. Then it comes an authorization space. What gets authentication? The authorization has to have a real-time, near real-time, and we talked, and there are various systems. The SAS team also, Keith and Ian, talked about this. So there are models available. Yeah. But please understand that what you need to leave for an authorization has to be very, very less, where our false positive ratios are going to be very, very high. So the job of an authorization is going to manage the false positive ratio. The job of an authentication has to be much more stronger to keep a clear architecture and a design in place. So these are the 2 things which need to be kept in mind.
Sure. I think the authentication and identification matters the most.
Authentication and authorization.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Authorization. Sure. Nitesh sir, let me come to you, and good to have you. So my specific question to you, sir, is, what can be the possible ways of identifying a large network of connected trades having similar modus operandi? Are there any methods of unmasking suspicious communities? What is your approach here? Because we see a lot of notifications on the SEBI website. At least there is one every month, barring some broker doing some, activities in the market, right? So how do you actually control all this, and what is your unmasking suspicious communities?
Thank you. Good evening to all. So we have heard about lots from the banking side, and I'm here to give you a securities market perspective. So if we see the securities market and the banking industry is more related to each other, and when we talks about fraud, it is very much related to. So some risk in the banking system will stress the market, and some stress in the securities market will impact the banking system. What we have seen, financial crisis over a period of time, lots of time. So, so that manner, what is important is to ensure the trust in the banking system and entire economic ecosystem of our India. As far as mule account is concerned and unmasking the fraudster and all, nowadays we have heard from all of you the KYC. So from the regulatory side, from the securities market side, we have changed it to KYS. So what we do is the know your suspects.
Yeah.
So we are more searching for suspects who has done a fraud or who may do a fraud. So that is the suspect for me as a regulator. And then we go beyond the KYC of that suspect and try to find out other things to unmask him, unmask his real identity. For examples, we go for open source intelligence, which is like social media, web intelligence, to know whether this is a real person who is actually trading in crores in my market, or it is just a mule account. So if you go by his photographs, his names, and turn to the social media, you will get the real profile of that person. And sometimes it turns out that it is a mule account.
Yes.
So these kind of things means knowing your suspect is equally important when we come to fraud. And it will also apply to your side from the banking fraud is also concerned. If you are saying that whatever we have heard is about finding a wrong transactions, but if you try it somewhere at a holistic level, you will see that there are group of communities, group of people who are repetitively using a different methodology to cheat your customer or do a payment frauds. So what is important is that you have to find those people, find those suspects, those communities, and also try to stop them to do these things with your customer repetitively. Like what we do in securities market, as sir has also talked about, that lots of order has been passed by SEBI to debar them, put them into market, that you have already cheated my investors, you can't come to the market. In a similar manner, if the banking side, if you see the communities, the people who are regularly doing handling the mule accounts, creating fake identity and cheating your customer repetitively, do KYS for them, know them, and try to put them outside the banking system so that they cannot cheat your customer, your bank's customer, as well as any other person in the same banking industry. As far as the tools are concerned and technology is concerned, SEBI has to use lots of technology because my fraudster, my other part, because they are involved in huge financial scams, they also use lots of technology, money, and everything. So what we have deployed, as I already told, the OSINT, open source intelligence, web intelligence, link analytics, to link and find community of the people who are interlinked, who are acting in concert. There are digital forensic, digital footprints available. SEBI also conduct lots of search and seizure operations to go to the ultimate, the suspect, go to his home, collect the devices, do digital forensic and find out the hardcore evidence to ensure that those kind of people should be punished for the crime which is already conducted, but also to ensure they will never come into the system again. Right. So ensuring those people to be out from the system so that they will not cheat the investor or the customer again is also equally important.
Sure. So एक important question पूछने का मेरा बहुत मन कर रहा है. Have you ever received calls from someone that, sir, can you invest here? You will get double the money.
So you are talking about influencer. They are there always. And sir, you will not believe our chairperson also get a call and SMS that you can invest in this strip and you can get your money double. So even in the SEBI also we get the calls. And this is what is the real problem. The problem which is there in the banking system is the same here with the investors. Also, when people say that overnight the money will be double, you will be able to do a good trade by tips and all. So awareness is one thing what we do. Plus, what we are going to do is that lots of social media monitoring to find the recommendations by the people who are not authorized. So those kind of banning them to give the recommendation, punishing them, and setting the example that if you do this, what kind of punishment you can get.
Absolutely.
So those kind of example setting is very important, what we try to do.
No, in fact, I think the SEBI's recent rules and the notifications of the FinFluencers was really amazing because I'm sure you must have seen, there were so many reels and the videos on social media asking people to invest in particular stocks immediately, and giving tips, buy this and this is the next multi-bagger, and lots of people, lost money over there. Even being a finance journalist, I have been always asked by people, which stocks to buy and where to invest. I told them to invest in my account, nobody did, but they just wanted some tips. But let me move ahead and bring Keith here, and would like to learn from you in terms of uncover some hidden relationships between the fraudsters and the financial institutions here. So my specific question to you, Keith, is, with fraudsters hiding the true identity and covering behind the mask, what are the techniques used to accurately identify entities involved in illicit activities and prevent financial crime?
Thanks for the question. I think often one of the key elements we talk about is around using network link analytics. We need to break things out in a little bit more detail, though. One is there's different techniques when you're dealing with new account openings versus account takeovers. But I think there was actually a hidden word we have to start at in that first question was we need to redefine what we think the word entity means to us. Historically, the word entity has meant to us is a person, an individual. When we think about trying to unmask account takeover, new account opening, we need to think of entity at the nature of an individual device information, an individual phone number, an individual email address, an individual address. So in that concept, before we get to network link analytics, we almost need to take a step back and redefine what we mean by entity analytics. So if we have a different view of what an entity is, not just a person, but a device, a phone number, etc., and if I start profiling that usage of that entity element and understanding where it's being used across different intersections, across different combinations, that's where then we're seeing that entity in network link analytics. So understanding, is it normal for Keith, who has had an account for 3 years with you, to use this device? This device has never been seen before, and it's not an IP address, it's a device ID, device identifiers. So that entity change is a key indicator of identity theft. Right. I think if you take that further and you think about, well, beyond entities, analytics and understanding the profile of a phone number use, et cetera, how is it that I understand what sits before a network, and that is the entities itself? So I think there's a long lost art that's being revisited in fraud and financial crimes around entity resolution. So how is it that we understand the potential, and in the US as an example, they have a huge issue with synthetic identities, where people are manipulating information from multiple identities, but because you haven't seen it before, you can't link it to a known fraud, to a known suspect. So the reality speaking is if I can resolve the entities and understand who I believe that sits behind that first, that plus that definition of entity analytics is what fits in the network link analytics. So network link analytics is one of those technologies we're using to advance that fight towards identity theft, whether that's new account opening or account takeover. But we need to look at briefly what is network link analytics. If we look at the maturity and the evolution, going back to the title of the session, first version of network link analytics was around the investigation element, in which investigators were using tools like I2 and others to say, let me query in the data and find and visualize relationships. Right. We are now at the perspective, and many organizations have moved to detection, in which they are using the networks, association with known suspects, associations with compromised devices, to say, I now have a correlation, a relationship that raises risk, and so I'm using that in a detection means. As we move into account takeover and identity theft, you really want to move to that next stage, which is around deterrence. How is it that I'm understanding those risks, those entities, and that I'm drawing those associations as it comes in a new account opening, as it comes as creating or executing a transaction? And that's where I think, where you look at that, we have moved from entity analytics into network link analytics, from investigation to detection to deterrence.
Okay, quite meaningful, in fact, very layered one. So my time is up. I really wanted to take a couple of more questions, but it's hard sometimes to do that. But I will take one question from the audience if anybody has one specific question. Yes, please, can we have a mic there? Yeah, please.
Thank you. We've talked through both the panels, the importance of KYC, the importance of profiling of the customers, and therefore to do the transaction monitoring basis, the profiling of the customer. The point is, at what stage is the profiling of the customer done? Again, Sunil, you also mentioned about, the profiling of the customer becomes so very crucial, and particularly when we talk of the digital onboarding of the customer that is happening nowadays. How's the real profiling of the customer, the touch, the feel, or the smell of the customer? Is it really happening? And is it a one-point profiling of the customer which happens, or the profiling of the customer keeps on happening throughout the journey or throughout the life cycle of the customer with the bank or with the payment system? And if so, how does it get updated? Is there mechanism? Are there tools? Are there techniques? Are those things being followed? Or I have been onboarded by my bank, say 15 years ago. My salary then was X lakh. Now it would be 5X.
Wow, good to know that.
Fair? Now,
Sure.
if the profiling has not been updated, I am going to create transaction monitoring and the alerts basis the old profile, and thereby leading to a lot of false positives. How are the mechanisms? And that's where I would want to understand. I have HDFC Bank over there, Federal Bank over there, and
So,
maybe some of the
Manish,
earlier
you
bankers
wanna-
also could respond as to how are they monitoring or managing this profiling update
Sure.
of the
Thank you.
customers.
Thank you, Manish.
So, good question. So, if you ask a short answer, the short answer is that profiling has to be done on a concurrent basis. It definitely cannot be dated. The point that I mentioned from an authentication and authorization perspective, and I'm not talking only the account opening or a transaction monitoring or any financial event. The profile mapping or the profile identification has to happen always at an authorization stage. Because authentication, what authentication will do, will know who you are. What you are doing is a part of the authorization status. Okay, and that is where, let's say, and there are multiple tools available, and like SAS also has a tool. So you can do a different kind of a layering, which can talk about that these are the 90 days profile, these are the 180 days profile, and these are the 360 days profile. Okay, and basis these three identification or the segmentation that we do, even from the transaction monitoring perspective, for any kind of a transaction monitoring perspective, it is much easier to know about the guy. The only thing, and sorry, I know I'm taking a bit 30 seconds more, the only thing which is making it little more difficult nowadays, that we are concentrating more on the financial transaction. The profile where we miss is a non-financial transaction. Okay, and in a previous channel, people talked about the enterprise-based risk monitoring system. So you will find that you, as a profile of a customer, do you come and check the account balance? That also is a part of your profile. Okay, what device you have been using? That's also a part of your profile. You are an iOS user or an Android user. Which kind of a Internet Explorer you have used? those are also part of a profile. So profile should not be confused only with the financial transactions or a financial events. That's what I want to add.
Sure, I think that was quite meaningful. I was talking to a data analyst who works in a bank, and he says, we generally don't lend to people who don't have an iPhone. So, because we think that they are poor, so we don't want to lend it to them. So in fact, why I'm saying is because that's kind of the data analytics and the integration and the synchronization they look at. But I will stop here. The time is absolutely up. We are running a little late, so I will stop here. Thank you so much for your meaningful answers here. Wish I could have taken more questions. And once again, thank you so much for listening to us very patiently. Thank you.